We should be very proud today to have Philip White with us, and we should be, because we get to be associated with him. Philip White is one of our own. His father was a BYU professor. He grew up in Provo. He attended Provo High. He did his undergraduate degree at BYU as well as a master's in English. His thesis for his master's degree was a collection of poetry. And at the last minute, they needed someone to serve on his committee, and it was my first thesis defense to be able to sit on his committee. It was only about 2 months after the defense of my doctoral dissertation, so mostly I read the thesis, sat quietly, and signed the forms, but I recognized that here was a poet. The thing I didn't recognize was the degree of Philip's talent and how he would develop into such an extraordinary poet. Wow, I'm getting emotional. He has many, many awards. Philip White has received a Pushcart Prize in Poetry, an honorable mention in the Glasgow Emerging Poets Competition. His poetry collection, which is The Clearing, this book, won the Walt McDonald Award for poetry and was published in 2007. Of this collection, John Hollander said, Philip White's poems are possessed of a clarity and a control of feeling. They never edge on sentimentality, that manifest acquired wisdom and achieved skill. Acquired wisdom and achieved skill. Those are certainly the qualities of his work. You can find his poems in the very best journals, including the New Republic, Slate, Poetry, Swan Review, New England Review, Southern Review, and Antioch Review, just to name a few of the places he has been published. He teaches Shakespeare and Renaissance literature at Center College in Danville, Kentucky, and he is married to the poet Lisa Williams. Each year I select a collection that I think of as my book of the year. I should have read this collection in 2007 when it was published, but I've only just read it. But let me tell you, this is the poetry collection I'm pushing this year. This is the best book I've read in a long time. Philip visited my poetry class and spoke to my students, and they learned a great deal. It was a wonderful experience. We learned a great deal about his aesthetic. He believes that a poem should be unified and whole. He believes that a poem should express something about what it is to be a human being. And he also said that he thinks that a poet should have thought long and deeply, and that the product of that thinking should enter the poetry. And that is what I find in his collection. There is a clear-eyed observation of the world. There is deep thought, and there is an ability to learn from its creatures about how to be and how to find the whole self and the true self. I would like to read just a few lines from the beginning poem, which is called Cricket and isn't about a cricket, but it's about a cricket sound. He says, whose life is this? And was it the dead who left it or we? We close our eyes and someone vanishes. Open them and another life is there to be seen. And that is the theme of the whole collection. He takes on probably the most difficult subject it would be possible to take on, which is the loss of family members. And he does it with an emotional depth. No, not only emotional, also intellectual and spiritual. A depth expressed in a voice that can only be perceived as wise and kind and peaceful. And it's a great pleasure to have Philip White with us today.
Thank you, Susan. That was very sweet. I think I'm going to start bawling already. That's no good. I'd like to thank everybody who made this possible, not just this event, but my being here. A lot of my siblings are here, and my nieces and nephews, my family. These are people who helped shape me. And also former teachers, great friends from way, way back. It's really touching and very, very moving to be here, and humbling too. I won't do the self-deprecation thing, which is my instinct, but Susan was very, very generous, I'll just put it that way, in her introduction. I'm going to start off by reading the first poem that Susan read a couple of lines from, and so you can compare her reading to my reading and see which one is best at the end of it. We'll hold up cards maybe afterwards, but the poem is called Cricket. Cricket has been an insect that the poet has been compared to from Plato, at least Plato, maybe before, I'm not sure. So that's one of the reasons it's called Cricket, but I'll just read the poem. A frigid morning, the trees outside nearly leafless, so the ticking now is limb on limb. A few ice grains slithering on metal flashings, roofers scraping shingles a block away, wind hollowing out some other space to be here. And some of the dead rustle back, bodily, hunching out in the cold just as they did. I approve the particular ways they shoulder the burdens of themselves. Remember by feel the knot to the side of one's spine where the pain never stopped. Note this one's voice. She had a snap inside her coat sleeve once that chirped exactly like a cricket when it touched her watch face. I listened for it as she moved along, creaking in spite of herself, laughing. Whose life is this? And was it the dead who left it, or we? We close our eyes and someone vanishes. Open them and another life is there to be seen. Time for a new roof, someone thinks, and calls in builders. An odd, unplaceable, wind-blurred rasp at dawn. At first, I thought it was a man out in the cold, trying futilely to clear his throat, about to speak. But it went on and on. It was only the builders out there. The book is really focused on the deaths of my parents and then the death of my first wife. I'll read a couple of poems that deal with with my parents, and then I'll see if I can plunge into the couple of poems about my first wife, whom some of you knew, and so again, this is a kind of hard reading. I was just telling my siblings that it's a little bit harder to read for people that know me and knew Leanne and knew my parents and so on than it is if you were just strangers. So act like strangers for a little while, and I'll be just fine. The poem I'll read is called "From the Country of the Sun." That's S-U-N, but of course there's a pun in there. I teach Shakespeare after all. It's only natural that I'd be doing that. There is a rare Shakespeare reference in the poem. It's to the character Miranda from The Tempest. Miranda is a young girl who hasn't seen anything of the world, really. She's grown up on an island, and when some people from the larger world come to her island, she makes the famous statement, "O brave new world that hath such creatures in it." And so somehow when I think of Miranda, I always think of my mother, even though Miranda's a young girl, and my mother, of course, was my mother, but But I think this hopefully catches a little bit of her attitude towards things and so on. From the country of the sun. Like other lights, our sun flares and passes. What luck then, Mother, that we were ever here, that we rose to it daily, unthinkingly, putting on our clothes, tying our laces as someone taught us to, forgetting again and again the heaviness of our bodies. I remember your visit east, the big cities. You were girlish, I thought, even then, like Miranda in her new world. Such creatures, I can almost hear you say. And your rapture when you finally saw the sea, the brazen everyday glare on the wet sand, and you standing there scarcely containing your joy, still strong enough to make a shadow. The next poem is called Movie Time, and there's another, I don't know how it is, but the poems I happen to have chosen today tend to, at least a couple of them, have some allusions. I don't usually do much allusion, at least obvious ones, in my poetry, but this one alludes to the myth of the gates of dream. There's an ivory gate and a gate of horn, and true dreams come out of the gate of horn, the less lovely gate, and the false dreams come out of ivory. In this poem, there's more of a distinction, not between true and false, but between maybe different types of dream in terms of memory or being present and so on. Movie time. The sound is lost, but the place long sold comes ticking back. There we are in the workroom downstairs at Grandpa's, standing for the camera for Grandpa's rigorous directing eye. There we stand, summoned to be visible forever, fidgeting therefore, trying to pull ourselves together, breaking at last, as if out of sheer nerves, into song. Make no mistake, it is discomfort we feel to be caught here, mouths opening and opening without a veil, like the gates of ivory, horn. We can go back, we sometimes feel, or we can't. Or we are back, the dream forever looping, the eye finding again the human eye, every voiced note, a chord suspended over years. Only the sound really is lost, and some of us are ghosts already. The next poem is called Lament. This is from the section about the death of my first wife. My heart stopped, but my body went on. Love, have mercy on me. The sky was ash, the earth a cinder. I don't know why I lived. I walked up 5th Street. I walked up 5th Street. My face became a stranger. I woke in chambers with others around me, sat down amid joy, ate without hunger. My body went on, my face a stranger. The sky was ash, I ate without hunger. My love died, but my heart went on. I don't know why I lived. Love, have mercy on me. Red Branch. A terrible fidelity held me. I had to move to keep quiet. Limbs plunging in the wind, dark air hollowed, shot through with promise of snow, I sought you. Absence swept the fields. At a bend, spiring red cedar, cold, down-licking brands of bared sumac. Like you, they kept beckoning, kept burning and not burning, held their tongues. Baucis and Philemon. This is another poem with literary references. Sorry. This is a reference to the myth of an older couple who entertained the gods who had come down to destroy the world. And they were entertained by this loving couple, Baucis and Philemon, in a very humble cottage. And the gods were so impressed by them that they offered the couple a wish, as often happens in this kind of tale. And the couple conversed with each other and decided that they wanted to die at the same time so that neither would have to suffer. And the gods rewarded them by turning them into trees that were intertwined together. And that's the myth that this refers to and is kind of built on. It's different from the myth, but that's the myth that's behind it. Baucis and Philemon. As in the fable, linden and oak twining together as one, yes. But before that and after, two in pain who found themselves up late, talking. Our portal of escape became a language we could not talk our way back through, tongues like limbs and trunks having fused in the passage. Nights in the nest, days, the bed made, unmade, and memory growing thick around it, tangled with dreams like flames driving streaks upward through our leaves and veins. So when the gods of endings came, we made a place even for them inside. And when they asked, no need to speak, we knew already what our wish was. Never to grieve, never to let suffer. Impossible then to say who broke faith. In the end, we could not save the other. There was one pain, one fraying braid, and two tracing the snapped threads back, trying to mend. Then there was one on the bed, up late, talking. The fires. You took yourself from us, love. Why? The part of me that knew your pain once thought it knew. Now I found her. There was a fault in me that shifted, the strata disaligned. Your lips, arms, eyes, the way you held your face up to the wind in fierce concentration. How do these pertain now? And to whom? I have lived as you wanted, loved again. Yet feel the snow on one slope of a mountain has slipped, and all the trees I knew there mangled, shorn. Wood for the new fires? How terrible these nights, lying awake late, trying to explain what happens in this world to our children who were never born. The next poem is called Veil. All morning, on the fringe of memory, a song that deepened these woods for me in summer has kept itself. Now snow brings out the lines of hills, trees, the dense bramble in fine dry point, and nearer, dark turns of limb made clear by contrast, a gash before me in the ground as if the burren had slipped. Everything in terms of others, I'm thinking, brought over, veiled, the way a thing you said got tangled with a sparrow's song I loved when you were gone. Sometimes what I remember is itself a memory, forged in some earlier need, and the thing, a catch of pain in your face, your capacity to surprise, gets scumbled, blocked out. Bare fact, true can be hard. Nights we lay, you reading, I trying to keep from being swallowed, from losing my thought. Yet I loved that too, the tug of us inside the other, growing old, chafing maybe, knowing we would have to begin again, but not yet, not yet. And I almost have it, that promise of a morning held out before us, your thought humming, known, mysterious, like a voice quietly, deeply there, far back beside me those nights as I drift asleep. Then you reach, turn out the light, and I am in some woods again, stumbling ahead. Around me, birdsong, haunting, half familiar, and behind, the mundane regress, branch behind branch, the lost faces, the lost thread. The last poem from that sequence that I'll read is called 6 O'Clock Flight to the Interment. It's a little longer than the others, so be prepared. And one of the reasons I felt able to make it longer, I usually have a kind of impulse toward keeping things short, but was that, well, when I get on a plane, my mind starts to wander, and so underneath this sort of meandering thought of the poem is that kind of thinking that being up in the air, for me anyway, allows. And it's the last poem of the book, and I think it reflects on the rest of the book in some ways. The immediate impetus for the poem was actually the death of my first wife's mother a couple of years after her own death, and but I think it sort of had a culminating effect for me, that experience, and I hope that also in the poem has a culminating effect for the book itself. 6 O'Clock Flight to the Interment. Sometimes it seems that everything's dislodged, slipping, and all we really know is pain coming back, along perhaps with glimmers of places we have been, made visible by change or changed attention. As lifted now through brief turbulence into this routine sublimity, I feel both freed and lost, and see the embryonic moon in its swirl of fluids wobble in inhuman view, the clouds below like the very earth, but scraped and colorless, a blank moraine, a surface infinitely formed and varied, but by strictures that elude me. Illusion of a surface, I should say, because they are only clouds. There's room in this cabin to forget them, though, and the crude thrust forward that unanchors us. We can close the windows and sleep, or try again to feel what we feel, or try not to. I'm going to see my second mother lowered in the ground beside her daughter, my late wife. And in the pause, I try to trace strands back that hardly hold together anymore, or hold me to what's gone. I have to face what is at last a limit, if not a failure, the points at which my loves fell from me, and even my pain was lost, and what remained was a mere place, the fields I walked in day by day. It's ugly feeling nothing, but worse to be unaware of it, or to call it moving on, or working through, or healing, to mock ourselves with snapshots, memories, adjusting the focus and sentiments to suit our needs, as if nothing at all had been lost, or the lost were only what they seemed to us to be. Pain may be true, but in time the mind numbs and wanders, and the dead don't come. Instead, random places, the small dark gap in the arms of the pine that looked inviting from my first grade classroom, or the flat in Hong Kong where I lay some mornings taking in the tops of trees below me on the street that seemed so disappointing but so real, though the spot I then lay is now 200 feet in the air between new buildings. But sometimes simply being someplace is all we need, and in bare sunlight on a wall, we sense a signature of what is conducting us, arraying, granting us entry, moving us from love to love. After all, there's room for joy here too. I try to piece it together, the rocky hill where the body will be laid, the various cries and yops of birds that breed or pass over, the trees in all seasons, the eroding cliffs, small tufts or shifting atolls of cloud, and always the vagaries of light on the cusps of everything, and a face, maybe, something said. But why so little of that, of others here, of their way of being in this place, of what they made of the look of things that stopped us, wrapped us in wonder, from which we took our cues, as if they were mere scenery, props, or like that bird back home whose call I knew too long for it to stay with me, so lost it was in my surroundings that only drifts of tone, of rhythm will come until I find my way back to that place. But weren't they more than that? Weren't they themselves sometimes, maybe from the start, a world for us, a field? And so the dead are like a struck stage, a slate wiped clean, a cloud moraine above or below, or within which everything takes place, and we will never find ourselves again. I'm going to read a few new poems from, or fairly new, at least they're not in the book. Some of in the first book, they're from my second manuscript here. I've tried in the second manuscript to narrate other people's stories a little bit more, to get a little bit more distance in some of the poems. And so I'll start with a couple that, even though they're in first person, they relate incidents from other people's lives. And then I'll read a couple of longer poems, and I think that will probably be enough. Maybe I won't even get that far. The first poem is called Waiting Room. Pigeon-like, unmeaning, a stream of barely syllables from such a big girl. and eyes that pin and read in mine that something in them is wrong. She'll grow out of it, her mother confides, leaning in a whiff of cereal and fabric softener from the next chair. It's all right. And maybe it is. The girl, now searching the box of toys, settles on a wood puzzle, spreads the pieces out. I hope they're all there. And when my name is called and I rise, her eyes veering back up at me, I want to bend down, whisper, explain, as if my words could touch her, as if they meant she did not have to be alone. This one's called Shimmer. The sun still in the clouds, but on the wet sidewalks already it feels dark. Street lamps flutter on. Set back from the road, random windows filled suddenly to their frames with yellow light are fireless inside. A young man is walking. He went out, deliberately forgetting his jacket, and walks hunched over, eyes on the concrete, hands pocketed. It's cold, damp, but if he walks long enough, something might happen. Other young men have encased themselves in cars with sound systems so they can roam the streets aimlessly more effectively. Their tuneless beat shakes the ground. Hearing them, the young man begins to feel the rage they consider part of their enlargement. If nothing else happens, at least the rage will happen. The low-slung cars move slowly down the streets, projecting their power, chrome trims buzzing. In another neighborhood, there's a young woman for whom thinking of the young man is like opening old wounds. She can't help it. She's locked herself in her room and lies on her bed, repeatedly jamming her forefingers together hard before her eyes. Thinking of her only makes the young man more restless. Not thinking of her drives him. She's not for him part of what might happen tonight. He goes on walking. The hurt that's building here will turn into something, but what? No one can say just yet. The evening goes on. Sun through the overcast seems cold, like a sheen. It's as if someone were pushing a sheet of metal to the street, now holding still, now bending it a little. I'm going to read a poem called The River, just because it has place names that some people in the audience might recognize in it. It's a longish poem, so bear with me. The River. Names from fables, names that seemed to the child almost to be fables. Nile, Ganges, Congo, Amazon, Don, Euphrates, Colorado. Rivers of fire and forgetfulness, of memory, the Muse's mother, the Milky Way, hell, paradise, beginnings, haltings, crossings, discoveries, departures, settlements. Then my own fable, a small river of small rivers, Provo, Hobble Creek, Strawberry, Jordan, Sevier, all but dry. And later, Deerfield, Bear, Clark's Run, Dix, and others without name, all emptying into the one river, the river in names. But water or way, form or flow, what are you? Archaic mover, your amnesty, oblivion. Anywhere water has gathered and found a way down, you're there, dispensing your laws, teaching what it is to be made of gravity and error, beyond reprieve to be doing and doing absently, your reasons unknown to yourself, drawn, falling, not pursuing, body through which bodies move, bearing your water life, your darters, slitherers, eggs, instars, your myriad unceasing deaths, your spilling vortices of spawn, metamorphosis, kills. Turgid, swarming, tawny, huge, muscular, you're a force carrying earth to the sea, or you're a spittle of foam in the desert clay, a washed-out gulch undercutting willows and tamarisk, tufts a child passing in a car imagines as refuge, home, the isles of the blessed. You're a glimmer snaking through the trees, metallic at dawn, stilling the man's thought on your banks, pulling him amniotic, lachrymose, loosening all that's coiled, as if you, not air, not flesh, were his element. At your edges, din of a million sobs and whispers, over stones finding voice, on snags sometimes you sing. Wrinkled sheet or braid or eddy scummed with curling pollens and oils, absorbing, disgorging, taking in and casting out, nothing your own and everything, tearing apart and tumbling together, your spoils, wheels, pedals, refrigerators, shopping bags, wrappers, halves of window frames, handles, leaves, scraps of bark, cables, trunks, limbs you've torn off still twining in you like limbs or blindly bobbing, siftings, portages, the lost and the tossed aside, and others washed up for the wrong ones to find. Currents within currents, rippled flashes of sky, clouds rushing beneath leaves, rushing between shadows of leaves, rushing over stones flashing with leaves, endlessly unwinding reel of real and unreal, figures warped and quietly writhing, hypnotic. I trace them as if they might lead. Where? Follow it if you're lost, they told me. But forward or back? Downward toward dispersal or up to the source? And for what? At the end of the searches, the fables go. An apparition, part nymph, part matron, part hoary old man, part beast, gapes up at you, holds out a key. I don't hope for release. Even in sleep, I hear it, the river pooling and surging and purling and cleaving and cleaving. I'll read one more poem. This is a poem for my wife, Lisa. It's called The Dispensations. Thus need reiterates itself, the flesh mere repetition, and all this grasping somehow loosening our hold, and every depth a screen, a trick, and interposing. How much must be left for us to be here now? In the blur of waking, it's hard some days to know which face it is before me, what language to invoke, from what devotion. So now, as you step out of the car, a little like your mother, I want to memorize the way the angles of your hips countervail the thrust forward of your weight, the body's unthought impacts, as you raise your eyes, and I take my first steps toward you. Thank you.